Hi, and welcome to Kelly, where we talk about life, your life and my life, and through Kelly, we hope to inspire. I am back again with Mark W. Travis. I don't know why I want to say Travis first. Mark W. Travis. And we're going to talk about another technique. Well, another Mark W. Travis technique. And it's really the foundation of the technique, correct?
Yes, it's the foundation. Write Your Life, the technique you're talking about, is the foundation of the Travis technique, which I can explain a little later. And one thing I think is really neat, just listening to your opening, Kelly, about this is the Kelly Show where we talk about your life, my life, and whatever else you said, how we can make our lives better or something. And now we're going to talk about Write Your Life, which is a technique, a process, an exploratory process of examining not only our own personal stories, but how we tell them and how we can tell them more effectively. So,
and Mark, you have now started online workshops, correct?
right, that's right.
So tell us a little bit about that, how it's going, because in my arena, I'm doing the same thing. It's definitely a learning process, but we're in a great time where we get to share vast information with many, many people. So I always say that we live in the best time of all history. Some people don't agree with me, but that's the way I feel.
No, I think you're right. This the process of putting a lot of my workshops, my techniques, my teaching and training online started a little over a year ago. The beginning of 2019, when Elsha, my wife, and I decided to put a lot of what I had been recording for many, many years into online webinars, trainings, and courses. And right now we have about 4 or 5 courses that are online through our school. But what's happening now with Write Your Life Inside Out, Write Your Life is a workshop that I have done for over 20 years, been doing on autobiographical storytelling, always in a room with people, traditional kind of workshop. And sometimes one-on-one, but usually with a group of anywhere from a half a dozen to as many as 20 people at a time in person. So because of all the shifts and changes now and because of the virus, we said, okay, how can we get that workshop online? So Elsa and I have worked very hard on designing how we could put it online through a series of webinars and lectures and demonstrations and all that of the technique, and to make it as close as possible. And I think in some ways it'll be better than the workshop in person. So we're launching this one the end of this month. July 27th it starts. Then it's every Monday for 6 weeks. Every Monday there's a lecture, there's a demonstration, there's a Q&A, and then there are assignments in between where you get to explore the power and the challenge of autobiographical storytelling. And I can go deeper into that part of it too, if you like, Kelly, about really what all of that is.
Is this a workshop that is mainly geared towards writers, or is it geared in a general way?
Okay, I have to talk a little bit about the genesis of it. This process began for me back in the late 1980s when I started working with actors, individual actors, developing autobiographical one-person shows. And that was at a time when there weren't any. I had one that ran for a year here in Los Angeles, and it was the only one-person show. In fact, it was seen as rather unique to have a one-person show anyway. But so the techniques that I've discovered and developed over these years initially came out of that process working with actors. But then I started working with directors and teaching them not only how to direct actors in one-person shows, but they had to understand the process. So now directors started taking it, and then writers started taking this workshop. And it actually got to the point where around the year 2000, I started teaching this workshop in Hawaii, and I taught it there for a period of 16 years. And the people who came to take it in Hawaii, most of them were not writers, actors, or directors.
Wow.
They were in whatever kind of business they were in. They were intrigued for, I think, a really beautiful reason. They wanted to explore their own stories and how to tell their stories and how to tell them effectively, and to really, at the core of it, understand their stories. In other words, it's one thing to remember a story.
I'm even thinking when you say that, one of the things that comes to my mind, even when you're pitching, like
Yep.
like it can even help you with pitching your story and really understanding your story, which is hard for people to do.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're talking about pitching a story, let's say you're you're a screenwriter and you're pitching a story, and you may say, okay, this story is about this guy who wakes up in the morning and he doesn't know who he is, and he looks at his wife and he doesn't recognize her, and he knows he's in the wrong house because he remembers another house. Now, I just made that up. Now, I could start pitching a story like that, and you go, well, that sounds interesting. But if I pitch it this way, I wake up, it's morning, I look at the woman next to me, I don't know who she is. I do not know who she is. I do not recognize this room. I know it's not my bedroom because I know what my bedroom looks like. I look at a piece of paper next to me, it's an envelope. It's addressed to a person who lives here. It's got a name on it, but it's not my name, and I don't know who. Now, I'm telling the same story in a different way. So a lot of telling stories, autobiographical or not, is how we tell this story. Any story. You can have the most wonderful story, but if it's not told well and effectively in an engaging way with the audience, it's just going to lay there flat. So that's what happens with Write Your Life. And another part of this Write Your Life process is really very unique when you think about it. If you're going to write the story of an event in your life, whatever it may be a birthday party, a wedding, or whatever, funeral, it could be anything, something that happened to you. You have to realize that that story you are writing actually is already written. By that I mean, you know what happened. You know what happened on that day. You know what happened to you. You know what happened around you. You know all this. You know all the circumstances. And in fact, so the challenge is, into writing the story, you don't have to create anything. In fact, you have too much information. You have a lot of information surround. And now how do you, like putting together a documentary, go through that information and decide what you're going to use, what you're not going to use. And then there's how do you tell it? And then there's what sequence do you even tell it in? So what we do in this Write Your Life process, this is why it's the foundation of the Travis technique. The Travis technique, which is all about storytelling, whether it's on the stage or it's on the screen, doesn't matter, but it's about storytelling. The very foundation is how well do you know your story and how effectively can you tell your story. And to work on an autobiographical story and remove the aspect of storytelling that says create something, create characters, create situations, create conversations. You don't have to do that. You have to recall them and then start going through what really happened and find the core of the story. And by doing this, we get so deep into what the core of each story is that you suddenly realize that little benign story about your daughter's birthday, which you thought was cute and clever, actually has a lot of more resonance and depth to it than you could imagine. And the beauty of it is it always existed. It was always there. This process is a way of looking deeper inside it and discovering it. And then, very importantly, how do I tell this story so that I can take the listener on the same journey I went through, now that I understand that journey better, on that same journey I went through the story.
Yeah. One thing, like with my actors, that's what I tell them all the time. I'm like, you're creating a life when you're dealing with your characters in the story. So even using that, starting off and being able to tell stories within themselves, and then transferring that over to how to use it within a script is very beneficial. You said that a lot of people, when they're telling a story, many times they leave out themselves. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's I totally understand it. You can tell a story about something that happened to you. I went out today, this is true, I went out today to run some errands, and I could tell you about what happened when I went on those errands. And what I will probably tell you about, well, most likely most people tell you, are all of the events that happened. Well, I drove here, I drove there, and then there was this problem, then it looked like there was an accident over there, and because of the virus, these people... In other words, I will share with you everything I witnessed, everything I saw, and I will go through the story, and I will expect that you will have the same reaction to those things when I tell you that I had when I saw them. But that's not true. You won't. You won't. Because all they are is details. And what you've done is you've done two very important or crucial things, that mistakes you've made. Not mistakes, I don't want to call them mistakes. What you've done is you've relied on the events to be the story. The events are not the story. Because you could listen to what my experiences with all these errands I went through, and there's not much of a story there, unless I let you know what was going on inside me. My fears, my apprehensions, my confusion, my expectations, my desires, my irritation. Now you have a story.
So it's really about taking somebody on a journey.
Yes, on an emotional journey. An emotional journey. I mean, here's a slight parallel. Imagine you go to a museum. Imagine I've been to a museum and I tell you about this exhibit I want you to see. Let's say it was a Picasso exhibit, and you go to the museum and you'll go and you'll have an experience there. And that may or may not be interesting, compelling, whatever. Or I could say to you, Kelly, I saw this Picasso exhibit at the museum. I think it would be great if you saw it, but I want to go with you as you see it. And you go, oh, okay. And now, as we're moving through the exhibit, I start pointing out things to you. I start focusing you on what I was focused on, or even a part of the painting. Now you're seeing this event, same exhibit, you're seeing it through my eyes. And I can even share with you, like I say, Kelly, the first time I saw that painting, I've seen it many times before, but only in photographs, but now it's there for real. And I share to you what happened to me. I've just changed your experience. In fact,
yes. Then I'm learning, in life, we're a point of view. We have our points of view. We see life as we see life, as we experience life.
Right.
And when you're telling stories this way, we get to further empathize with you and your story and the way that you see it. And hopefully our viewpoint also broadens.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what goes on in Write Your Life. It's a wonderful, rich process. There are aspects of it which I could get into if we have time, some of the techniques I use that screenwriters have come and taken a class. They love the class, but they get a little upset because I have storytelling techniques that I've developed or discovered that they can't use in a screenplay. Storytelling technique. Well, when you're telling a story, it's very simple. When you're telling a story, just like I told you, I made up a story about the museum. The errands thing was a true story, but I tell you a story. Or just before we started this broadcast, Kelly, you and I were sharing some story. So we tell stories all the time. And as we're telling the story, we are narrating. We narrate this story. You can say, this is what happened to me. I was going into the library, blah, blah, blah. So we describe all the events because all we have is our words. We don't have pictures. We don't have anything else for the reader or the listener, forget the reader, the listener to grasp onto. So we narrate the story. Let me tell you, I walked into the library. It's this beautiful old library, and it has these big, it's all built up stones, these big, massive stones. Who knows how they got there? Now, if I just say that to you, Kelly, and in fact, anybody listening, suddenly is creating an image of that library in your head.
Right.
That's great. I don't need a camera. You're the camera. You'll create the image, but I have to describe it in such a way that you'll create it. So that's narration. But there are two, this is something I discovered many years ago that is really powerful. There are actually two narrators you can use. Now, a narrator is you telling the story. And if I tell you the story about going to the library, and I said I was a young boy, I was a teenager, and I was going to the local library, and when I got there, now that's by instinct, I am telling the story in the past tense. By instinct, we will almost always do that. Two reasons. One reason is because it was in the past. It was a while ago, even if it was just this morning, but this one I'm telling you was years ago. So we will tell it in the past tense. That's by instinct. Also, it's by protection. If I tell it in the present tense, there's a great chance that I will go back. As I'm telling the story, I will experience what I experienced back then. So telling in the past tense keeps me a distance away. If you could see this, if you imagine that the story is right here, this is the story that we're trying to tell. The narrator that tells the story in the past tense is outside the story looking in. Okay? Which means, this is very important, that's where the audience is. Because I put them there by telling in the past tense. I keep them outside the story and they look into the story. But if I tell the story in the present tense, and I said, you know, I'm 14 years old and I have to go to the library and I have to study. I don't like studying. I'm a little afraid of the library, but because it's this big old stone building and it's kind of scary and it has this staircase that you have to go up to go to the bathroom, and that's scary. I don't really like it, but I'm going to go there because I'm supposed to be studying. Now I'm in the present tense.
Yes, and I'm more engaged. I'm more engaged.
Yes, exactly, Kelly. Thank you. And the reason you're more engaged, and this is really the wonderful thing about an audience and listeners, the reason you're more engaged is because when I tell it in the past tense, there's the story and I'm outside telling it. If I tell it in the past tense, you know immediately, as soon as you hear the past tense, you know that I know how the story ends. In fact, I know everything from that story up until today. I know everything. There's no mystery. There's no tension. There's no suspense. And as soon as I switch to that 14-year-old boy and I start telling the story as the 14-year-old boy, you will accept, you will believe, you will embrace the idea that I do not know how it's going to end, that I don't know anything beyond this moment, and that you are now, rather than with the story here and you're outside, now if the story here, you are inside the story.
And you as a storyteller are rediscovering, and then we're discovering with you instead of hearing a story of the past, we're going along that journey with you.
Yes,
and
exactly.
You still know the outcome, but every time you tell it in the present tense, you're discovering, you're in the discovery process.
Absolutely. Now, think of it this way. Now I'm going to get back to screenwriting for a second. Screenplays, as we all know, are written in the present tense. The reason they're written in the present tense is because we want the audience to accept that what's going on is going on for the first time, even though the audience is smart enough to know, you know, it was years ago that someone started the screenplay and then they went through all this production and rehearsal. They went through the whole thing.
Right.
Even as we're watching that actor, we're watching Tom Hanks as that character. We're smart enough to know Tom Hanks knows how the movie's going to end. He knows how the scene's going to end. We know that. There's no mystery. We know that. We even know that, let's say it's something like Saving Private Ryan, if Tom Hanks gets killed or something, he's okay because it's Tom Hanks. He's still alive, so I'm not worried. But we, because it's presented to us as if it's happening now, we want to be in that naive position of not knowing what's going to happen. And of course, the characters, the actors are playing it that way totally, and we will embrace it. That's where we want to be. That's where we want to be.
And if it's good, we'll watch it over and over and discover it over and over, even though we know how it's going to end.
Exactly. Even though we know how it's going to end, we will go on the journey of not knowing. The naive, we want to go on the naive, innocent, vulnerable journey, not the safe, protected journey of, oh, I know how this is going to work out and everything will be fine, or it won't, or I'll die before the movie's over. That's not interesting. What's interesting is we want, as listeners and viewers and readers, we want to experience that journey, the journey that the character experiences as he or she is experiencing it. I'm going to give you a real simple story. You just had lunch, and someone says, "How was your lunch?" Now, a story is going to come out of you because you're going to tell them how the lunch was. And you can say, "Oh, it was okay. It was okay. My wife made me a ham sandwich, and it was quite good." Now, that's in the past tense. We go, "Okay, that's exciting." Or you could say, "You know, I'm sitting there and I'm opening the bag, and I'm expecting a salad. I really want a salad. And there's no salad in the bag. There's this sandwich. There's this rather strange looking ham sandwich." Now, I'm just in the present tense. Suddenly, the same event has mystery, intrigue, suspense to it, and the audience will be engaged. Our primary job as storytellers is to keep the audience engaged and take them on an emotional journey. That's it. That's it.
Now, you say that you have many clients that will take this course over and over.
Yep.
Why do you think that is? Or
Well,
what's your discovery in their interest each time they take it?
Well, yeah, this happened, as I explained to you before, this happened a lot in Hawaii, and it's an interesting culture and dynamic and community there, where a lot of people...
How long were you there?
16 years.
You were in Hawaii for 16 years?
No, I was not in Hawaii for 16 years. Elsha was in Hawaii for 29 years, but that's where I met Elsha. That's another lot. That's a good story too. Sometimes I'll tell you that story, how I met Elsha and how. Anyway, we're falling in love and getting married. I mean, this is the wedding shirt I wore. Okay, let me go back to Hawaii. When I say 16 years, no, I wasn't there for 16 years. I was invited in the year 2000 to go and teach the workshop as a weekend workshop. I taught it. It was very successful. A lot of people took it. A lot of people wanted to take it again, and a lot of new people wanted to take it. So this kept going on for 16 years. Usually in January.
And you did meet your wife through the workshop.
I certainly did. And
that's so awesome.
That's another story. But
yes,
I want to get back to your issue about people wanting to take the story more than once.
Yes.
As the workshop in Hawaii became more and more popular, more and more people wanted to take it, which was great. We had to make a decision of what to do. We thought of doing one in January, one in June, things like that. But then we came up with a brilliant idea, which is really good. Let's do 2 weekends in a row. Do a 3-day workshop, take 4 days off, do another 3-day workshop. So there's 2 workshops, identical, but so we could handle more people. What we did not expect is the number of people that would sign up for both. They would 2 consecutive weekends. And I remember saying to a lot of them, I say, why are you taking this twice? Now, a little side note here. While I'm there and we're arranging for the second weekend, I'm going, great, another weekend, do the workshop again, but should it be the same thing or should it be like a more advanced one?
Right.
And then I'm thinking, okay, let's do something that's more advanced. And I'm talking with Alice Ann Parker, who's helping to arrange, she's the organizer of it all. And I'm sitting there and she's saying, yeah, well, do whatever you want to do. Let's try 2. I said, so I've struggled. And for a long time, I was struggling with how to make it special and different. And then it came to a point I said, I have no idea how to do that. All I know is what I'm doing. And I know that if I try to make it more advanced, I'll keep sliding back to what I've always been doing.
Right.
So I said, well, I'm going to make it the same. And I would tell people, it's the same workshop. I'm teaching the same thing. So I would ask people, why? Why are you taking this twice? It's the same workshop, just 4 days later. And they would say to me, every single one, in a different way, would say to me, no, it's not the same, Mark. It's totally different. Each time I take the workshop, it is totally different. I know you're teaching the same thing. I know you're giving the same lectures. But there are 2 things, big things, 2 or 3 things that happen. One is the whole constellation of students changes. We could have anywhere from maybe 12 to 15 students in there, and maybe half of them were in the weekend before. They were there, but the other half are new. That's changed. The energy in the room changes. And there's something powerful about you have 15, 16 people in the room telling autobiographical stories, sharing their stories with each other. And suddenly you realize this is new, this is different. Now, I may be teaching the same thing. I am. They're having a different experience. But a lot of them explained to me that when I would do a lecture, like I touched on, like about the 2 narrators, they say, it comes out different. You say it differently. Now I hear it. Now I understand it. Now it's getting clearer. So a lot of people will come back to get clearer and clearer. Or just the fact that in the second workshop, they're working on a different story than they were in the first workshop. So there were so many aspects of the process that makes it different that I eventually realized, no, my best thing to do is be as consistent as I can.
Well, and they're also seeing how different groups of people react to their stories. Even if they were telling the same story with a different group of people, it would still have a different reaction. So no matter what they choose to do, it's always a different experience.
And you can imagine in a workshop like that, because there are a lot of exercises, a lot of writing exercises, which we'll have on the online course. All the exercises will be there. That's all part of the same process. And you do the exercise once, and you have an experience doing this writing exercise, and it'll reveal something to you. And it'll certainly put in your hands a new tool for a way of expressing something or writing something. And then a weekend later, you're asked to do that same exercise again. It will come out differently.
Right.
You'll do it again, and maybe it's because it's on a different story, or maybe because you've already done it once and you think you know how to do it, and then it comes out differently. So it's for the participants, it's a growing process. I don't have to change the workshop. They keep coming back for that nurturing and nurturing, and some people have taken it 12, 13, 14 times.
Wow.
Elsha's taken it I don't know, Elsha's probably taken it the most, even before we got married, and now because she teaches with me often, and she's taken it so many times. And anyway, it's fantastic. It's an extraordinary experience that will reveal to you a lot about storytelling, a lot about the power of storytelling, a lot about the techniques of storytelling that you may not even be aware of, that you've heard, you've seen, but you're not aware of what they are or how to use them. It'll also, because you're working on your own personal story, your own personal journey through an event or whatever, it's going to reveal a lot to you about you.
Yes.
You're going to start to see things about yourself, recognize things in yourself. And there's one aspect of this process that is really interesting. When someone gets up and tells a story to, say, a dozen people, and we all hear the story, we have a reaction to the story, and we are starting to ask questions or even make statements about what we think the story is, what's really going on, or we question the storyteller about what she or he was really doing there. You, as the storyteller, will start to realize that the person who is talking to you understands your story better than you do.
Wow.
Now, and many times I would get this even working one-on-one, especially when I'm working one-on-one, which is the most powerful part of the process. And I just finished 2 big projects with 2 writers, one in Germany and the other one in England, I think. Yeah. And they would read a story to me, and I start talking about the story. They go, "How do you know that? I would say, here's what I'm sensing. And here's the reason why I think I or a lot of other people can see more about what is going on in your story than you can. Think of this. You tell a story, and imagine that story from your life is one tree. It's one tree and a forest. And all the other trees are other stories, other events, other things that are going on. Your whole life, your whole background, your whole history is a big forest of trees. And you picked out one tree you're going to tell about. Now, as you tell us that story, all we get is one tree. That tree. What you get as you're working on the story and writing the story, you get a tree that's existing in the middle of chaos, which is the forest. You can feel all the other stories. You know all these other things that are going on. And because it is a tree in a forest, it's hard for you to see that tree purely for what it is all by itself.
I see that as we're sharing stories just on social media with current events and things like that. We're sharing things from our experience, and then somebody else will jump in and interpret that in a certain way, and there's still so much more to the story that you realize you have to give in order for that person to completely understand, and then it gets frustrating because you're like, it's just too much.
Yes. And many times you can read a story and just have one person, and it could be me, but it could be somebody else in the workshop or something, responds to it, in such a way that they say, well, I thought you were writing about how ashamed you were of your father. And I've seen this happen many times, and the person who told the story goes, what? Oh, no, I just thought that's what you were writing about. No, I'm not.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Now, what happens, and many times, has nothing to do with the father or the shame or anything. What happens many times is what's really going on in the story does leak through. And the listener can feel it. They can feel it. Say, I'm getting this feeling that this is what you're talking about. And you can see the writer sometimes starting to get a little upset, not just because they've been accused of something, but because something has been revealed that they were not aware of, didn't want to go to, but many times it's the truth. And that's what's going to happen in the rewriting of this, especially if we're working on a larger show or a memoir or something larger, a larger piece. Is you say, okay, do you want to reveal that? Do you want, do we want to dig into that? Maybe we should dig into that. Or, quick story, Rochelle Newman, who I worked with many, many years ago, came to me because she runs an advertising agency. She's not Hispanic, but she runs a Hispanic advertising agency. And she had a lot of wonderful stories about that whole world, and she wanted to do a one-woman show about it, so I was working with her. Every once in a while, she would bring up something about food, eating too much food, not eating enough food, dieting and all that. And I would keep asking her, what does that have to do? Nothing. She says, I don't know why that's in there. And she would take it out. But it would keep coming up, almost story after story, something about food and eating. And finally I said to her, Rochelle, what's going on? Why is this coming up? And I remember this moment very clearly. It's because she was sitting right in front of me, and she's sitting in front of me, and I'm asking her what is going on, and she starts to shake. She starts shaking. I said, what is it? She said, I was anorexic for a long time. It almost killed me. It didn't, but I was anorexic. And I went, oh, okay. Then I said to her, just a very simple question. Is that what you want to write about? And she looked at me and she says, no, not at all. I said, you're sure? She says, yeah. Well, a few months later, her show on anorexia opened. It was called Hip Bones and Cool Whip. She wrote blistering stuff, revealing stuff, horrifying stuff about fighting anorexia. It is what she wanted to write about.
Wow.
And she finally, it was like a week later when she called me and said, Mark, yes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go into that dark zone. Let's go into that part of my life which I've been trying to run away from. Maybe I need to run to it, and let's do it. She did it. And ironically, when it opened and it got reviewed in the LA Times, the critic in the LA Times gave it such praise because the critic was a mother of a young girl who was anorexic. And then the critic brought the daughter to see the show, and it became a healing show for a lot of people who would come to see it, and not just people who were anorexic, but people who were dealing with anorexia. And because it was a journey, getting back to that narrator, that naive narrator who takes you inside the story, that naive narrator who was revealing to the audience very, very clearly. There was Rochelle, a grown woman, married woman, but as a young girl when she was anorexic, revealing to the audience exactly what is going on inside her. And I remember one moment very clearly when she convinced us, told us how, and made it so clear. She could turn a leaf of lettuce into a piece of steak. She could eat the lettuce and think it was steak.
Wow.
And I went, wow, that's amazing. So all she would eat was the lettuce, but she convinced herself that she was eating, a big, chunk of steak. So it's amazing. So this is what can happen.
Well, that also shows you how powerful your imagination can be if you, creating it that vividly to turn it into a piece of steak. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, I remember after one show, one Well, two things. This has to do with doing solo shows, which I've done, I don't know, 30 or 40 of them. I've done a lot. And it was very clear to me that the ultimate goal in doing a solo show, what you really, I would tell every performer I was working with this, that I said, what you're waiting for is after a performance for somebody, a total stranger, not anybody you know or know, they don't know you, who comes up to you and just says, thank you, and walks away. I said, that's what you're waiting for. Nothing more than a thank you, but a big thank you. You don't know what you've tapped into. You don't know what you've exposed or healed or clarified for them. You have no idea, and it doesn't really matter what you've done, but what matters is you have touched them deeply in some way.
Which I totally believe. That's the reason that we are artists, is because we want to affect our environments. We want to share our truths.
Exactly. The lighter side of that story is the woman who came up to her after one show, and I was standing with Rochelle, and she said, "Can you teach me how to be just a little anorexic?"
That's what I'm saying.
But that's the kind of things that Rochelle dealt with all the time. That it's like, oh, you didn't really get it, did you? You didn't get this show at all. That's okay. Fine.
Well, that's the person that's on the opposite end and dealing with a different disorder that would like to, have a little bit of anorexia put into.
Yep.
And we all have struggles. We all have things that we're dealing with. So, when dealing with how this is geared towards a director, what are some techniques that you use?
Well, for a director, it's first of all, when directors come to work with me and work on a project or consulting, the first thing I do is have them write a 3-minute autobiographical story. Write it for me. And then we will work with that story. And this happens in our workshops or working one-on-one. We'll work with that story, not the script they're working on, not the project they're doing, but with that story, doing a lot of the same techniques and using that story to explore the power of storytelling and their insight into a story. So again, it's the foundation. And then we can move on to a script or something else. What happens occasionally, which happened with one client of mine, Lewis, in England now, is that little 3-minute story he wrote now is becoming a feature film that he's going to do. He was so intrigued with what he was discovering and what he was writing about, and he's writing about himself. Now he fictionalized it, but he's kept the story the same. He's just made it so it isn't clearly autobiographical, but he became so intrigued with the power of what he was doing. And simultaneously, and this is whole nother topic, he's learning the interrogation process. So he's doing both of those at the same time. And that's a lot of what I teach to directors, because interrogating an actor as a character means you're getting as deep into that character as you have to get into your character in the autobiographical story.
Which is something you have classes on also, correct?
Right. We have the interrogation process. Yes, there's another one coming up in September. Starts in September. It's a 6-week long online webinar series course on the interrogation process coming up in September. Now the other thing, just getting back to directors and writers and actors, as I said before, this was originally developed for actors, doing one-person shows. But now we are using this process mixed with the interrogation technique with a lot of writers and a lot of directors to get deeper inside the stories. If a director is working with me and he's doing a film about, I'm going back to the story that I made up, the man who wakes up and doesn't know who he is and thinks he's somebody else, and that's his story. Now, for the director to really understand this fictional character, he has to be able to embody the character, not just think about the character, not come up with ideas about the character, not just a journal about the character. All of that's good, but that character has to live inside the director. and it has to live inside the writer. Now, it does because the writer wrote it, but with the director, I can say, let's say this character's name is John. I could say to that director, I've read the script, I'm going to interrogate you as John. Now I'm interrogating the character John that lives inside the director. Now, if that director has gone through the Write Your Life process of exploring himself in a character, he will be much more fluent at this and see the power of this. Then, when the director starts working with actors, he can do the same thing through interrogation. And one more step, which is really significant, which I used on this film in Italy a lot with a 9-year-old boy who was the lead character, is having him write, the young boy, him, or I would do it for him sometimes, and then he would get involved in it, have him write the story of his character scene by scene by scene through the movie in the first person present tense. Now, if you can imagine doing that, and you're not just saying, oh, I have this scene where I go and I meet my mother, seeing my mother's very angry at me because my father has done. That's outside. That's the outside talking into the story. But if that character, that actor can talk about his or her character from in the story. I'm standing here with my mother. She's very angry. There's something about Dad. He did something. I don't know if he did something good or not bad. If you could start to write autobiographically from your character inside that scene, then you will discover the scene. And what you will really discover, you'll discover more than the scene, you'll discover the character, but you'll discover things about the character that you never even imagined were there. And they came out of you.
Yeah,
It just came out of you. Nobody told you this, and you didn't sit down and think, oh, what would be interesting here? One problem, which I'm sure you run into, Kelly, with a lot of actors, is their desire to be clever. The desire to, oh, this will dazzle them. No, don't dazzle me. Don't do that. Don't. First of all, don't even think that way. Just reveal the character. This is a way of revealing the truth of the character, the power of the character, through this process of autobiographical storytelling. And this little boy that I was working with, the character he was playing, is actually 7 years old, 2 years younger than him. Not a problem. The problem was the character is Jesus Christ at 7 years old. And so he had to embody that character that nobody knows much about anyway, as a 7-year-old. And I would spend a lot of time talking to that little boy, Jesus.
Wow.
You know, because he's actually on an autobiographical journey. Now, he's playing this character, but as Jesus, this is his story. So he has to know his story. And also, when Elsha and I consult on screenplays, a warning to any of you who ever come to us to consult on a screenplay, it's a good warning. We will interrogate you as your protagonist, at least. Maybe some of the other characters too, but especially as your protagonist. We will interrogate you because that character that you've created, totally fictional, I'm assuming, for the moment, was born inside you, was created inside you, and exists inside you. And the biggest obstacle you, the writer, have to that character, to revealing that character openly and honestly, is you. You get in the way because you, the writer, want to control it, want to design it, and you want to be clever, and you want to be brilliant, and all of that. And all of those desires, which are very, very valid, wonderful desires and dreams and aspirations, they get in the way of who the character really is. So if we interrogate you as that character, and that character comes out, you will discover things about the character you never knew existed.
Right.
So that's how this is how, Kelly, I went off all way over into interrogation, but this is how the Write Your Life is the foundation of this process. And people keep coming back to it, come back to take it, but coming back to and using these techniques.
Right.
To the techniques of autobiographical storytelling to fictional characters, and it's very powerful.
Well, I'm glad that you have something that is a format that people can go to and learn this process. Too many, one of the things that I'm working on too is trying to put more things into video and more things on paper, because I show up to class teaching every week, but I don't really have, so, you know, this can go on for generations and generations long after your life here is done, which, I mean, is something to leave behind for people that can benefit them in the future. So thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So I have an offer.
Okay.
To you, Kelly. Well, it's to you. You and Diego, you can take this workshop if you like, and we can discuss that on the side. But to your listeners, to your viewers out there, this online workshop, which I said starts on July 27th, and it's $300 for 6.
Which is really reasonable.
It's very
great
for
price.
6 sessions. It's like $50 a session.
Right.
And but to the Kelly Talk Show audience, we have a special offer. One thing is there is a discount up until a certain date, which is July 10th, which you missed, but that's okay. But to the Kelly Talk Show audience, you get the workshop if you want to tell it, but you have to reference the Kelly Talk Show.
Okay.
To get that, you have to reference this is where you heard about it. You get it for half price.
Wow.
You get it for $150.
Wow.
Now, the only way to do it is to reference the Kelly Talk Show, then to us, and you can figure out how to get in touch with us, either through Kelly or whatever, but you can get in touch with us. And then we send you the code. There is a code you can use that will give you a 50% discount. So you can get that.
Now, if they want to get in touch with you, they go through your website, correct?
They can go through the website. We can put up
We can put a link below
email.
this.
You can put a link below this, either to the website, which is thetravistechnique.com, or you can write to contact@thetravistechnique.com. That'll get to us immediately. That's one of the fastest ways to get to us. There are a lot of ways, and we can put other things down below, somewhere down there, right?
Okay, right, down here.
that lower third down there. Yes.
Well, I am going to definitely, my personal students, I am going to refer this to them. There's very few coaches, or I know you're not really a coach, but there's very few people that I really trust my students studying under. I mean, I really have to know that it's credible to also what I'm teaching, and this is something that I definitely believe in and would like. I see it benefiting them as far as their acting careers.
First of all, you don't even have to want to write.
Right.
And a lot of times I say this workshop is not a writing workshop, although you do a lot of writing. It's really a storytelling workshop. It's really an exploration of how you tell stories. You don't have to want to develop a one-person show, although you could. You don't have to want to write a memoir, although you could. But you could be, like a lot of our students, are people who just are in business or whatever relationship they're within or whatever business they're in. They're in a situation where telling stories is always good. What you have to remember is telling stories is powerful. Telling true stories is powerful. Telling stories about yourself, where you become vulnerable, is probably the most powerful story you can tell.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people, either whether it's in business or because they are speakers or they are preachers or they're community leaders, they like this because they realize, wait a minute, how can I use my stories? I have stories. I have great stories, and how can I use them to communicate with other people, connect with other people, affect other people, inspire other people? That's what this is all about. You can have a story that you think is a great story, and it'll always stay the same story, but through this process, we're going to help you make it stronger, make it more relevant, make it more compelling, more engaging, and I can guarantee you, if you do this, you'll have more fun telling the story. You're going to you're just going to have a good time. You go because you know what the story is doing. You know how you have manipulated and written and structured and framed that story in such a way that you've got them, and you can tell, even as you're telling the story, you watch them, you go, yeah, I got them. They're not going anywhere. They're going to hang in with me right to the end. And that's what you want.
Which is so perfect for and you mentioned this, but motivational speakers. Like, I'm thinking of people who do TED Talks and things like that, that have to, I go into schools a lot of times and talk to students within the school system. And that's really good for me because I have to share personal information. Great, awesome. Thank you for being here with us.
You're
Send
welcome.
our love to
You're
Elsha.
welcome.
And
Yes.
we will see you during the week. We see you a lot, but to my students, to my students and to our audience, I'm glad that they're getting to know you and to know what you're doing as well. So we're glad to share here in Atlanta because you're LA. So we're glad to share here.
Please be safe. To you and Diego and everybody listening, please be safe.
Yes.
The best thing to do is be conservative. Be cautious, be careful, be conservative. Don't be arrogant, don't be pushy. We will get through this eventually, but the only way we're going to get through it, we have to take care of ourselves, but we really have to take care of each other.
Yeah.
We have to be very mindful of the health and well-being of everybody.
We really have to see ourselves as a whole and think about how each of us affect one another. And when it really comes down to human life, we all are connected. Even though we're individuals, we still all affect each other. Everything in this life is cause and effect. And I'm very blessed. Diego does all of our grocery shopping. I don't go out of the house because I'm pregnant, which is weird because I've never been at home this long. But I'm taking in my world in a different way that I think I was so busy before that I have not been able to do that. So but I hope we all get through it. We all want to go back to work. Mark, we all want to go back to work.
Well, and yes, we do. And I just, the work that Elsha and I are doing, I just feel very lucky.
Yes.
Because we haven't, ever since the virus hit, we haven't stopped working at all. In fact, if anything, we've become more focused. But that's because of the nature of the work we're doing, and because it's our own individual work, and we can do it online, and it's with individual clients. So I'm happy to be working a lot right now, and working a lot online, and being able to share because of things like this webinar, be able to share with more people than if we traditionally, if it wasn't for the virus, there were certain countries we were scheduled to go to teach, and we would have done that. And there were certain workshops we were going to set up here in LA, and we would have done that. Well, we can't do all of that, so everything's gone online, and I think in many ways we've reached more people online than we would have if we had done all that traveling. So
I totally agree. I'm in a small area outside of Atlanta, and I've been able since getting my online classes up and going. I've got people from South Carolina, North Carolina, in different states that are a part of the surrounding states. That is, and I hope to move beyond that eventually. But yes, I do think there is a blessing in everything.
Yep, there is. Yep, you have to look for it sometimes, but it's there.
Have to look for it. Well, thank you, Mark, and we hope that this segment educated and inspired you guys.